I'm Randy Ellis. I'm here today with Roy Williams, the President and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. And today he gave a speech to the Rotary Club with some real interesting news. Roy, tell me first the news you have about what the U.S. Justice Department has said.
Well, before I spoke to the Rotary Club today, I received a call from David Prater, our district attorney, and he had just returned from Washington, D.C., and he said, I want to tell you something because I want you to say it at the Rotary Club today as well. And it was that he had been in conversations with DOJ last week, had sat down with them at a lengthy period of time, explained to them what was happening in Oklahoma City, explained to them the Chamber and the corporate community's engagement in this whole issue, not just of the jail, but of the whole incarceration process. And he said DOJ was so impressed with what the community is doing, they basically said, we'll sit back for at least 2 years and let y'all work through this and not have this pressure on you again that DOJ may come in and take over the jail or either mandate, improvements or construction or whatever. So in essence, DOJ has said, do what you're doing, we'll stay out of your hair and let you do it. They also said they had experience working with the consultant we're working with Vera in New Orleans, and that was part of the reason that they felt that way. They felt if we engage and we have the people and the community engaged, there's going to be much better outcomes that come out of this than if the federal Department of Justice comes in and mandates change. So we were really excited about that. We were not anticipating that, but it ended up being some good news.
Okay, catching people up a little bit. Anybody that's lived in Oklahoma County any length of time knows we kind of have a mess with our jail. It's overcrowded. We have about twice as many people as it was built to house. There have been talked about building a bigger jail. The sheriff went to the business community, talked about what would you want to support me in this, and the business community, as I understand, said, well, let's rethink that a little bit. Let's see if there might be a different approach we can take to our criminal justice system.
Yes, and essentially what we also did when the county was thinking about that is we did some polling. And the polling basically said that the voters would not support building a new jail, that they were not willing to do that. And that was when the county came to us and said, well, can you all help us in this? Can we come up with something the voters will support? And so our leadership said, yes, it's time we address this issue. But the decision on what we do with infrastructure will be the last decision we make, not the first decision. So we shouldn't talk about building something until we know what it is we need to build. And so the process has brought us kind of to where we are right now, and that is really looking at the pipeline of how people get into the jail and all of the decisions and the processes and the players who are involved in that process, because that's where your potential of reducing your incarceration numbers are.
And a lot of the thinking is you've got a lot of people that are incarcerated because of mental illnesses, drug abuse, alcohol abuse that perhaps could be better treated rather than putting them in jail. Is that
traffic
fair?
Violations, if they're not a threat to other people, they're not violent, maybe there's a better way and a more cost-effective way to address those needs instead of locking them up in a maximum security jail, right, which is what we have.
So the business community went out and they retained the services of Vera, which is a New York City-based kind of a nonprofit consulting group that looks at these types of issues. And they've taken a look at Oklahoma County. Tell me some of the things that they found. Yeah,
we did a very short contract with them, and we asked them, come in, look at 30,000 feet, give us your observations about what's going on here. So they came here, they interviewed most of our task force members, they interviewed other people connected to the criminal justice system, and they issued us a draft report, which we're still finalizing, that did a couple things. One is it outlined in a 6-step process the whole criminal justice system, everything from arrest to the last one, which is post-conviction, what happens. And then shared with us in each of those 6 areas what their observations were. about how does the arrest process work in Oklahoma City, because it involves all the police departments in the county, plus the sheriff's office, plus other law enforcement agencies that arrest people, and how that process works and how they interact with the jail and what alternatives that they have or don't have before they carry them to the jail, whether there's mental health treatment or alcohol substance abuse treatment and stuff like that, or other kind of courts and stuff like that. So they went through each of those and shared with us what their observations were. And then they also proposed to us a phase 2, that if we liked what we saw, if we felt they were going down the road we wanted to go down, what would phase 2 look like? And that's what they're getting to us now. We do not have the proposal yet. We've talked. We have a good sense of what the proposal is going to be. Essentially, it's going to be a 7 to 9 month engagement process with Vera to really dig deep into data, better understanding all of these systems, and then Vera will come back to us with recommendations, with priorities of those recommendations, and then with jail population impact of those recommendations. So we as a community can decide which changes, improvements do we want to make, what the cost of that will be, what the impact will have on jail population. So at the end of the day, when you look at all of it, you'll be able to say, well, if we do A, B, C, D, E, and F, we could end up with a jail population of this number. And that's when you decide, well, are we going to ask the voters to, pay for renovating the existing facility or building a new facility, or is there other infrastructure requirements? Because until you know who these people are that are going to be in the jail, you don't know what kind of facility you need to take care of them.
And one of the things that you said, I thought it sounded real hopeful. Vera has worked previously with Albuquerque and New Orleans, as I understand.
They've worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of cities around the world.
Tell the people a little bit about the results.
Well,
in
they
New Orleans
actually
and
didn't work for Albuquerque,
okay.
but they have information and they know Albuquerque.
Okay.
They have worked for New Orleans, and they continue to work for New Orleans,
okay.
In partnership with the Department of Justice. Yeah, Albuquerque had this same problem we did, jail overcrowding, et cetera. They went through major policy changes, and they reduced, in a 2-year time frame, their jail population by 40%. And if you were to equate a 40% reduction in our jail population, that's 1,000 people less in our jail than what we have today. That doesn't mean we can do what Albuquerque did. We don't know what they did. New Orleans, pre-Katrina, had a jail population 5 times higher than the national average, 6,500 people they had in their jail. Not their correction system, but their jail. Their facilities were significantly damaged in Katrina, so they had to look at rebuilding. They were going to build a 5,800 bed facility, which is just 10% smaller than what it was pre-Katrina. They decided that was probably not the right thing to do, so with Vera, they went through this whole process, and they elected finally to build a 1,400 bed jail, which was a fourth of the size of what they had before. So that's a huge, huge reduction in the population that they're projecting in their jail.
And it sounds like they've identified some things within the Oklahoma County jail already that have pretty big potential.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that about 400 people in there have serious mental issues, and they don't get addressed when they're in jail. And that's what these other communities are doing, is they're addressing those issues outside of the jail and not putting those people. The same with alcohol and drug abuse. They're giving them an alternative to treatment as opposed to incarceration. Also, some of them are changing felony convictions, limited felony convictions to misdemeanors. And they're changing some judicial constraints to where the judges can just impose fines instead of imposing jail. And they're doing other things too, about like just notifying people that you're going to have a hearing. I mean, we don't do that. So people forget, well, then their warrant goes out for their arrest, and then they get thrown in jail because they didn't show up at a hearing. Well, we don't all remember our appointments.
And little things can have a big impact.
Yeah, exactly.
And they talked about the so many people, the money being a big issue. They don't have the money to post bail, so they sit in jail, and there's opportunity for having non-monetary releases that might save
Correct.
a lot of people being in jail. There's also something really interesting that you said about that the public defenders are paid based on their number of court appearances.
Court appearances, yeah, yes.
And that can maybe lead to unnecessary delays.
Yeah, you know, instead of, usually when you engage an attorney, you're paying by the hour, you're paying for time as opposed to appearances. But in our system, it's appearances that the court-appointed attorney gets paid. So if you're one and, you know, you need to be concerned about income, well, the more appearances you make, the more money you're going to make. So we've created those kind of incentives. There's another one, and that is if you post bail and get out of jail, you're not eligible for a public defender. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of encouraged to stay in jail to have access to a public defender, which doesn't seem quite right. One of the other things Vera observed is that we have a huge and heavy reliance on fees. Mm-hmm. So when you're brought into jail, you have to pay for the bed you're sleeping in, the commissary. You have to pay for court costs. If you get out, you got to pay for monitoring. If you are put on probation, and we tend to put people on very long probations, they incur a lot of costs because maybe they have to go in for periodic drug tests and stuff. Well, they have to pay for all that, and they have to miss work to do all that kind of stuff. So they described it as we're very onerous on the people who are most likely not able to pay, and they're being charged the most. So we charge them a lot of fees, but they don't pay them because they don't have the money, because they can't get a job because they're in jail. So you get this spiral and cycle that people can't get out of.
Well, I appreciate you coming by to talk with us today. I think we've learned a lot about our system, and I think there's going to be a lot more within the next few months that we're going to learn yet. And it sounds like there's a lot of hope that when it's all said and done, we may come out with a system that has a perhaps not as big a jail as we're talking about at first, but perhaps a better criminal justice system.
You know, absolutely. And I think the real simplistic way to look at it is if you could turn these liabilities into assets, it's a real win-win, because right now whoever's in jail costs us money. If they're outside and they're paying taxes, they're helping us solve the problem instead of creating the problem. So at the end of the day, that's the objective here, is to try to get people back to where they need to be.
Thank you, Roy. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.